Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm glad to talk about it. So today we're going to talk on getting your house ready for a house inspection or acing an inspection. This year we're kind of hard pressed for inventory in Renfrew County and other parts of Ontario. So selling your house is a little bit easier per se, but getting yourself ready for the house inspection or listing for all that matters, because quite frankly, when your house gets put on the market, it's going to go quick if it's priced right and is in good shape. So um, my advice to you um, for getting your house ready for sale or to ace your inspection, if you will, is to do a pre-inspection. And what that is basically is we'll go in before listing or before offers and tell you what's wrong with your house. And basically what we will do is test drive your house and tell you the conditions of the house, or bring you aware of the fact if there's anything that's going to be a deal breaker, because whether you tell us or you don't tell us, it'd probably be found out, and it's actually better for you as a seller if you're actually found out beforehand. So if a pre-inspection is not in your plan or your thought, at least there is ways to get your house ready for listing or the inspection for what I'm basically looking for as an inspector. And it's not just my inspection. Most home inspectors now adhere to some sort of code of ethics and standards of practice. So we're pretty much all looking for similar criteria, although we're all basically different in our experience. My team is no difference. I have 17 years experience myself, and my junior guy has about 3 years experience. And 3 years experience sounds like a lot, but in my business, it's still relatively small. So that being said, so if we're not doing a pre-inspection and you want to get it ready for your listing, then my advice to you is we're going to go through different areas of the house which you should concentrate on. Your roof, for example, is a big budget killer for people. So when a person and prospective buyer is there and they're wanting to know if your roof is in good shape, for example, right now with the snow on the roof, it's pretty hard for me to take a look at it. So the forthcoming of the information from you, the seller, is very important, because if at some point we can see a little bit of roof, then we it's better for you as a seller to tell us exactly, if the roof is 17 years old, we would much rather hear that the roof is 17 years old. So then we can take an educated guess whether that roof is in good shape, which is, typically we could tell that from the way the shingles are. So without knowing that, or if you have a concern that your roof is in good shape, that you should have a contractor come in before the offer is in place. That way your roofing contractor can look at it and say, there's problems there, and here's an estimate that we can fix your roof. That way, when your potential purchaser is there, they can work that into their offer, because it saves you a lot of grief in the end, because if they come in and there's repairs that need to be done on the roof, then they would much rather know that they need to do that. It's the same as your foundation. One of the big concerns for people is, whether the foundation is in good shape. If you knowingly have areas in your basement that's maybe wet, or maybe you have a concern that it's not in good shape, you should have a foundation specialist come in and give his opinion and do the necessary repairs if you have the opportunity before you list a house or before the inspection. That way it's you're giving knowledge to the purchaser that yes, there might be a problem, but yes, here's a professional that's actually said, you know, it's X amount of dollars to fix it. That way you can work it into your sale price, and then the purchaser can work it into their offer price to you. So roofing, foundation, very important. The next thing you really want to do, what really is a concern for us, is curb appeal. I mean, so there's a reason why the person's got an offer on your house, and that usually is the curb appeal. The best thing to do before the inspection is to go and tidy up any areas that, you know, if you got a loose shutter, or you have a loose piece of fascia, or you have a loose handrail, that sort of thing should be addressed and put back in place before I show up. Because if I'm listing in my report, you know, a loose handrail, I mean, to me, that's, you know, a lack of maintenance, if you will, which is although it's little and it's an easy fix, if you put that on top of 3 or 4 easy and little fixes, it becomes a bit of a shopping list. And the higher that shopping list is, the more concerning it is to a purchaser. So it's better before you list your house or have the inspection is to go around and do all those little touch-ups on the outside of the house. Drainage, when you're on the outside of the house, you're also looking at that as well. So one of the #1 problems as a home inspector that I have is moisture intrusion, which is a big concern for everybody. Nobody wants water in your house unless there's actually coming out of the water tap, your faucet. So there's ways to control your moisture around your house, being you gotta keep your eaves trough going, keep the snow away from your house, your eaves trough, downspouts. You got to make sure that those are directing the water away from your house so that you don't have any surprising water in your basement. Because once you have the water in the basement, it's sending up a red flag. So, and then all of a sudden that potential buyer that you have there is a little bit concerned that we have a red flag here. So next thing you want to do is bring in a professional. But if you've addressed that before the inspection, then it's a step further. Or if there is a leak because of a downspout, for example, then at least you can say to them, yes, I had a leak. Yes, it was a downspout. Yes, we put it back together again. And no, it probably should never happen until the downspouts are disconnected again. So water infiltration is very important. You should try to control that as best you can. Another area that you want to key in is, if you have a car garage, is basically make sure that your garage door is working and safely. Your garage door is one of the biggest mechanical parts in your moving parts in your house. So you want to make sure that it's safe. You want to make sure that your safety devices are working. The last thing I want to do is see your electronic garage door reverse sensors on the ceiling, because that's a safety device. And if you as a seller are willing to deactivate a safety device, it really puts me on alert, because it's unsafe. I mean, it's unsafe for you, it's unsafe for your family, it's unsafe for your vehicles. So that's the sort of thing that we want to get addressed before the inspection. It's a good idea to declutter your garage as well. If your attic access is in the garage, we want to make sure that we can get to your attic, because for that we want to make sure that your insulation is the way where it's supposed to be. And if your classic Corvette is underneath your attic hatch, the last thing I'm going to do is put my ladder up against your Corvette, believe me. So it can be parked outside for the day. That way, as a home inspector, we can get in and take a look at your attic and check your insulation. Your insulation is important as well. If you live in an older house, right now, a big scare in the industry is vermiculite. Vermiculite insulation, if you don't know, may or may not contain asbestos. If it came from Libby, Montana, that vermiculite insulation is probably contaminated with asbestos. So if you're getting your house ready for market, it's better for you, if you know that you have vermiculite, is to have a contractor come in and test that insulation. I'm one of those contractors can do that, but I'm not. It's more the fact that you should have somebody test that insulation to see whether it does contain asbestos. If it does contain asbestos, then you'll probably want to remediate that before you put your house on the market. It's better for you defensively as a seller, because quite frankly, if the contractor, if you don't deal with it beforehand, it's probably going to cost you more in the long run, because we can turn a $7,000 or $8,000 job into $16,000 job, just because for whatever reason a purchaser always compounds the amount. So if it's a $8,000 job, all of a sudden it's a $16,000 request. If it's a $4,000 job, all of a sudden it becomes an $8,000 fix. I don't understand, but it seems to happen that way. So, and it's usually a negotiating tool, because if you ask for 16, you probably get 8. And if you ask for 8, you're going to get 4. So there's a little bit of cat and mouse in the whole real estate industry that way. And hey, it's a good game too. So, so you want to make sure that your attic doesn't have vermiculite. You also want to make sure that it's well insulated. Our standards have changed, 4 or 5 times in the last 20 years. So if your house is older than 20 years old, your house insulation is not up to today's standards. So adding the insulation will put your purchaser at a comfort level that they're good for. I often get people ask me, is it up to standards? And I have to say, well, it's up to the standard of the year it was built. A house that's 20 years old is up to standard, but it's not up to today's standards. So if we have to compare to today's standards, your 20-year-old house is lacking insulation. So normal request for me would be to add the insulation. So if you've already gone ahead and add the insulation to the attic, then you're further ahead of the game. You've made it more appealing, and the more you make it appealing for the purchaser, the quicker and the faster and more approving it will be for them. Electricity, there's often, we want to make sure that all your electricity is safe. One thing I don't like is when I go through a garage or a basement or even the exterior house, when you have dangling electrical wires. There's no good reasoning for it. It's a safety hazard. A lot of those circuits have 15 amps running through them. It takes 1 amp to kill a person if it leaves their body in the right direction. So playing electricity is not anything I would recommend to anybody. And so when I see that in a house, it really makes me uncomfortable. So you also should check all your light bulbs. If all your lights are working in the house, then that's a great thing. If I have to determine whether it's a blown out bulb or a bad circuit, that's time consuming, and it's also safety related as well, because for me to try to determine whether your lights are failing because of electrical issue, I have to actually go after the electrical issue. So playing with electrical is nothing that you should do lightly. You should hire a professional electrician if you have repairs that need to be done. But changing a light bulb is an easy job, and as a homeowner, as a seller, you should actually be able to do that. A lot of things that it's good as well as clutter in a house. I mean, clutter in a house is the same as, you know, how do I describe that? I mean, you have to declutter your house. I mean, realistically, if I have to move a lot of stuff in your house, then you got way too much stuff. So it's better, and your realtor will probably advise it as well, is if you're getting your house ready for sale and you got a pile of stuff, you should, you know, rent a storage unit for a while to get rid of that clutterness out of your house. Because if a potential buyer can't see what they're buying, then they tend to, you know, question the house in itself. So it's a good idea, you know, if you need to rent a storage unit and declutter your house. And it makes it way easier for me, and it makes me way more happier, because when I have to start moving, you know, 4 and 5 containers just to look at one, you know, your sump pump or your electrical panel, it's okay on a Tuesday, but on a Monday, I'm probably not enjoying it so much. So decluttering your house is in your best interest and my best interest, because nobody wants to take off the home inspector. Not really in it. I think if you're selling your house and you have the opportunity to talk to your inspector and he asks you a question, you're probably better to forthcome the information, because if you're more willing to help, then I don't see you as a bad person. I mean, if I ask you a question, and I've done it, I can ask a leading question just to find out whether the person is actually going to tell me the truth or not. So is it a trick? No, but it actually goes to the integrity of the seller. So realistically, you got to be honest and forthcoming with the information to your inspector. That's if you're there. Quite frankly, most of the time, as a home inspector, we don't want the seller being there. We don't want your kids there. We don't want your dogs there. We don't want your cats there. I love dogs, but I don't want to see your dog there, and that's not the right spot. So on inspection day, it's better for you to take the family, take the pets, and go for a drive, and go wherever, just so you're out of the house, so that I can do my job and the purchaser can actually talk freely. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's a big purchase, and they want to be able to ask a question to me, because not every home purchaser actually knows about their house. They hire me as a professional, or a home inspection as a professional, to guide them through the buying process, because it's a big investment, and we want to give them the best value for their dollar in our conversation to that. So be honest and take your kids away. One thing I do suggest for you, and I mean, over the years, if you've done repairs, big expenditures that will improve on the house, or, you know, if the roof was repaired 7 years ago or replaced 7 years ago, and your furnace was replaced 3 years ago, and your water heater was replaced 2 years, those are the sort of things I would actually leave them on your kitchen table for the inspector and for the purchaser, because if there's questions in there, we have that information right on your desk. and that's forthcoming with the information, and that makes the purchaser more comfortable. It makes the home inspector more comfortable. It makes the realtor more comfortable that that information is there. Because if I have to guess when the last time that furnace is serviced, it's basically a red flag for me, because I'm saying, well, and it could very well have been serviced last week. But if I have no information saying that it's serviced last week, the first thought to me is, when was this furnace serviced last? And usually that goes hand in hand. And you might have a past leak from in your furnace cabinet. And if I look at the leak, I'm saying, well, there was a problem here before. At least if I look at your furnace service work order, then I can tell you that, oh yeah, he was here last week. So that's a good thing, and we can continue. Big expenditures like that are good. If you built a brand new deck, you can put that on there with the work order, the building permit, and then there's no questions whether there was a permit taken out, and it makes the purchaser at ease, makes the seller, it's better for the seller if they're forthcoming with the information as well, because then we're not guessing. And a lot of people guess, and which is not a good idea. So if you're selling your house with your appliances, I'd also ask that you would empty out your appliances. I'm not saying empty out your fridge. I'm just saying, if you got dishwasher full of dishes, hey, I mean, I gotta try that dishwasher. So last thing I want to do is put spots on your clean dishes. So pull out the appliances, declutter, empty your garbage cans, make your house clean, and as cleanliness as you possibly can, so that our job's at ease. So maybe I should open up for questions if you had a question. Can't hear you though.
Hi. These are all great tips. Maybe they haven't written any questions yet, so feel free to put any questions in the chat. But I was wondering, like, is there one in particular that you see of all the different suggestions, like which one that normally people get dinged on the most? Or is there one that comes up often where you're like, this is a reoccurring one that makes people fail an inspection?
Normally what's really, I'd say something that comes up often is the filters in a furnace are like dirty right away. That sends up a red flag for me. And the heat recovery ventilator is usually dirty, which is a red flag for me as well, because to me, those are ongoing maintenance that needs to be done from the seller. And of course, the purchaser has to learn that as well. But yes, I think that's one for sure that's kind of annoying. Annoying for me because I see it every day. But it's also a maintenance thing, because if you're not cleaning your furnace filters, you're depending on the efficiency of your furnace, you can inadvertently be ruining your furnace. So if I come across a furnace filter that's completely dirty, then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, we need a tech here, because depending on how long that filter has been dirty, then it can affect the performance of the furnace. One thing I see often too is toilets. Toilets are supposed to be secured to the floor, and they're supposed to be sealed to the floor, which that's a common occurrence. And quite frankly, I always laugh, because we sit on that toilet pretty much every day. We would think that we would know that the toilet's rocking. Well, the toilet's not supposed to be rocking. So, and that again is an easy maintenance. So what else? Those are two that really are fun. And handrails. most of the time people take their handrails off into their basement. Those are always good to put back, at least for when I'm there. I'd say about 70% of the time when I'm looking for a handrail, that handrail is in the basement up in the rafters or the joists. So they're usually there. People, please put them on because it's a safety. It's a safety.
We do have a question. It's a loaded question. So, so how much is a pre-inspection? That's the first one.
A free inspection?
Now, a pre-inspection.
Oh, a pre-inspection. Okay. Well, that'd be free, I think. Normally a pre-inspection, I usually knock, it's $100 off our list price, depending on the size of the house we go at. A typical 3-bedroom bungalow normally costs me around, my fee is usually around $450 plus tax. So a pre-inspection before market is $350 plus tax. And the reason why the difference is we usually put out a pre-inspected sign. So that reduction is my participation in the advertising. Obviously, when you see every time you see that name behind you, that's advertising for me. So I'm not all bad. I usually participate in that, and that's why the reduction. So.
Perfect, thank you. And well, is it covered by the military? Do you know, or would you know that? Like if it's part of what not Brookfield, but BGRS pays, or?
BGRS does not pay that unless it's extreme conditions. Normally they will reimburse for a purchase. So a pre-inspection is not covered from what I understand.
Okay. I know that changes to yearly, so it's good for members to really have a look at that book or online now, all the information on that. That's what I recommend when clients ask me about that.
Yeah, and that's why, like, as far as in past years, they haven't done that because they're reimbursing on the purchase. So I suspected the members that are wanting to sell now already own their house, or they want the pre-inspection, they're getting it ready for sale. They already own the house, so chances are that they've been reimbursed in the last few years. So I can understand why BGRS does not want to pay for a pre-inspection.
Yes, absolutely.
I still think it's good value. We're fortunate enough this year is that with the way the demand is, that pre-inspection is probably good for the seller. That way they know what they're up against. But quite frankly, as long as they're ready for the inspection, if they're going to be there, then at least there's, if they take some of the information that I mentioned, that it might make it easier for them. And I think I sent that to you. We can share that with the people.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. What if we have mice?
Mice? Yes. Mice are everywhere. So as long as you don't have an overrun of mice, then I wouldn't be concerned. And quite frankly, if I see one mouse trap or two mouse trap, I don't think it's out of the ordinary. If I see bait stations all over your house, then sometimes we'll recommend an exterminator. We're fortunate enough in Renfrew County that we have a couple of good exterminators. The stats on mice are, if you have 2 mating mice in 1 year, you can end up having 200 mice. So that's why we're okay to see mice. And I have mice in my own house from in the fall of the year. So I'm not surprised to see mice. But if you, as a seller, believe that you have a mouse problem, then that should be dealt with before listed on the market. You can leave the bill from the mouse guy showing his treatment, or at least let them know. But again, I'm not afraid of mice, nor should any homeowner really.
So does the inspection that was done when prior to buying the house needs to be shown when you're reselling it?
It does not need to be, but I would recommend it because as a seller, you're forthcoming with the information. And basically for me, it's all cards on the table. So if you had your inspection done 4 years ago, I would suggest that you put it on the table. I would also suggest that you put any receipts from any expenditures you've done to the house, any improvement you've done on the house, your regular maintenance, put that on the table as well. That way, now as a home inspector, when I go there and I see even my old reports, I would never look through them. I'm usually going in there and I'm doing a new unbiased report of the house, and things change, even in 3 months, even in 6 months. So to me, I would never look at my old report, but a potential purchaser might look at your report. And sometimes if your report's on the table, they won't even hire me again, depending on when it was. If it was 2 years ago and your house is, 10 years old, they might actually pass on the inspection because you just laid all that nice information out for them on the table, and they're saying, hey, this seller is forthcoming with the information, we can trust them. And sometimes that's going to bypass my service. And quite frankly, I don't think it's a good idea. But as a consumer, if you see all that information, I think you can tend to rest a little bit more easy because the seller is forthcoming with that information.
What if the dishwasher came with a home from their previous owner and you've never used it, but how do you prove when it was bought?
When it was bought, I wouldn't know, but there is serial numbers on the dishwasher. And usually when I go through a house, I take a picture of the serial number, and then I'll usually test it to make sure that it's running under a good condition. Now, there is stories that the dishwashers disappear and you get you substitute with another lesser quality, but that doesn't happen very often. And I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Well, I think with the serial number, you're correct. With the brand and the serial number, you can even go online and it'll tell you kind of when it was. That's a really good way to know.
Right, correct. Normally for me, once your appliance is like 10 years old, I mean, most companies, yeah, unless you have an extended warranty, most companies, once your appliance is 10 years old, then most people get tired of looking at them after 10 years anyway.
So I have a wood fire pit inside home, so a foyer. I never use it and it is not certified. Is it a problem with the inspector?
Typically, normally, no. As a house inspector, I would look at the wood appliance and tell you if there's deficiencies in it. I'm also a wet inspector. So if you're selling the house as is or without a wet inspection, then we bypass that section until that's a requirement. But normally if you're selling the house on an offer to purchase, the homeowner normally is asked to wet certify that wood stove. So if the wood stove has failed in the past, then it's better for you to say, we're not going to certify it and we're not going to warranty the wood stove because maybe there was a failure and we're not going to do anything with it. But if you never use it, then that doesn't mean it fails because quite frankly, I was at just one today, they haven't used it and I could see all the cobwebs in it, but there's nothing wrong with the fireplace. So each circumstance is a little bit different, but that's not a problem, but it can need to be repaired or brought up to standard.
Okay. Is it the inspector who estimates the value of the property?
No, that is an appraiser. That although I do have a pretty good idea of the value of the house, I tend to stay away from that part of the game because that's none of my business. Your realtor should be able to give you a price value for the house. If you're needing a amount value from the bank, then there is actually property inspectors, or sorry, property appraisers. That's their job.
What is a wet inspection?
WET stands for Wood Energy Technology Transfer. They are the self-governing body of the wood burning appliances. So if you have a wood burning appliance, whether it be a wood stove or a furnace or a fireplace, they would need a qualified personnel to go in and inspect it, and then they will actually sign off saying it's wet certified. Essentially, it's not, there's no certificate for the appliance. It's basically a certificate from the inspector saying that the wood stove is safe and good to use.
Has been very informative.
I'll try. I've had lots of practice too.
Well, yeah, you can tell, you know what you're
There you
talking
go.
about. So, I have another question. How long can it take a pre-inspection?
How long are they good for, or how long does it take?
How long does it take?
It's usually about the same length of time for a house inspection. Anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours for a normal 3-bedroom bungalow, let's say 1,500 square feet. The larger they are, then it takes a little bit more time.
Perfect. So I don't think we'll give them another 30 seconds, I guess. But this has been like, even though you've done this for the PMFRC before, I've learned there's always good questions, so it generates
Well,
different answers.
And that's why I always like the my clients to attend, because they ask questions that I would never think to tell anybody, and sometimes they ask a different question that I've ever come across, which it still happens. Even after 17 years, I still get asked questions a different way, maybe, or maybe I just forgot. I don't know.
So once they've had a pre-inspection, how long is that good for?
Typically, pre-inspection is usually set up for sale of a house. Now, there's a couple of different ways we do it. A pre-inspection, if I'm doing it for marketing purposes, I sometimes will switch it over to the purchaser, depending on the agreement. Now, the pre-inspection is usually done for the seller, if you will. Now, if the purchaser comes in like the next day and buys the house with the pre-inspection, then it's done. But if it's a short period of time, then I'll normally transfer it to the purchaser so that there's legal obligations from my part, basically saying that, if I've misled the pre-inspection, if you will, for a purchaser, it's the same legal ramification. So that way, as far as time limit, there's really no time limit. It kind of depends on the parties involved. But I can tell you that a pre-inspection, after you get about 6 months or a year, you're pretty much, we're using old information. So if you haven't sold within a year, pre-inspection is probably not working the way we wanted it to. So I've had properties where we took a pre-inspection off after a year because I couldn't really tell people without referring back to my report, which is different. But that doesn't happen very often. I've had pre-inspection sell within the week, so they're all individual, but I don't know if there's really a time limit per se on that.
I think it makes sense though, because 1 year limit, maybe I think would be safe to say, as you say, because you had a full year and then other things might happen. That,
Yes, and you're correct that way. And I've always said to people, if my pre-inspection hasn't sold your house in a year, then it's time for a different strategy. Really. Yeah.
So what if someone has a water tank rental? What kind of information can I provide to the inspector?
Basically, really what, as an inspector, all we really want to know is whether it's rented or not. Sometimes when I go to a house, I can tell that it's rented because it's got, a rental company sticker on it. But most of the time, my decision on the water heater is basically the condition of the water heater. So if I'm looking at a 4-year-old rental water heater that needs to be replaced, maybe because it's leaking or something, then that information then gets turned back to the seller, because if it's a rental water heater, then the rental company normally replace that water heater at next to no cost for the person that's actually renting it. If there's no stickers on it, then there's usually a conversation back and forth between parties, whether it's a rental or not. And if I don't see a sticker, the first question I ask is this a rental water heater? And it's more to bring the purchaser's awareness to whether it might be a rental or not. Because some rentals are $18 and some rentals are $48. And there's a vast, it's another fixed cost that maybe the purchaser is not thinking on.
Yes, and sometimes they have 10 years left on their contract, and sometimes they have 3. So
Correct. Yeah. And sometimes they got backloaded conditions on a water heater that makes it almost horrendous to get out of them there.
all right. I don't know. I think this seems to be the end of the questions. Well, thank you so much for donating your time, Ron,
I'm
and
glad.
for
Yeah.
doing this the house inspection for us. Hopefully you'll do this. You'll be able to join us on another time. Maybe in person next time.
Well, let's hope this COVID goes away,
Uh,
because you know what, yeah, this is kind of different for me. Although I'm interested, I'd much rather see people face to face.
Absolutely. All right. Well, don't go anywhere. I'm just gonna stop the recording.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.